Welcome back to Chow Time Pods. Your host, Red. Got a video today from Alexander Grace.
So last night I was talking to a group of guys, and apparently when I walked away, they were like nicknaming me Tits. They were like, "Where'd Tits go? Where's Tits?" And while I don't condone men calling women by anything other than their name, yeah, I paid 10 grand for these. You can call me Tits, and I'll have a fucking smile on my face. Yeah.
Oh, because if you paid for it and it's okay to victimize you or, call you my body parts. Got it.
I'm Tits now.
That's interesting because the rule is don't call a woman anything other than her name, but she will allow you to break that rule because she likes the attention that her plastic surgery has gotten her.
If somebody said to me, would you rather be with like a short king who's 5'5" and treats you amazing and loves you, or would you be with a toxic man who's 6'3"? At this point in my life, I would be like, how toxic? How toxic are we talking?
Okay, so the rule is don't be toxic, but maybe it's okay if you're tall. Okay, I think I'm starting to sense a pattern.
You get to be hot and broke, or you get to be ugly and rich. Those are the only two options.
All right. I think I understand now. On the surface, this seems like double standards. Like we have caught women in their hypocrisy. So you're thinking, all right, how are they going to avoid accountability here? How are they going to weasel their way out of this one? Because these double standards, they don't seem justifiable. But consider this. What if women don't actually need to justify themselves? That's what you would need to do as a man if you were being a hypocrite. But what if women have cleverly positioned themselves in a completely different paradigm? They have moved into a different space where your demands for accountability and consistency can't reach them. And what if that space is actually the hidden source of women's power? Now, when I say power, it's obvious what I'm talking about when speaking to you as a man. You're thinking building, working. Your power comes from creating stuff. You feel powerful when you're winning, you're beating the competition, you're rising above others. The most powerful man is the man who is the strongest and the smartest. It's very clean, it's very straightforward. We're talking about a meritocracy. But did you ever consider that women looked at men playing that game and they realized that they could not win? Women could not outcompete men in that kind of a contest. They can't use superior strength to win out against men. They're not going to be able to out-engineer them. From the woman's point of view, being asked to play that game, that feels unfair. A meritocracy discriminates against their femininity. Why would they play a losing game? And so women did something that's extremely clever. They set themselves up outside of the game. They declared themselves to not be players, but judges. They're not going to compete. That's not their role. Their role is to evaluate who is the winner. And by placing themselves in that position, they became infinitely more powerful. Because consider, who is actually more powerful, the person who's wearing the crown or the person who decides who wears the crown? Understand, female power does not come from creation, but from selection. She thinks, I don't need to build a kingdom. I just need to position myself so that I'm the one who decides who gets to enter this kingdom. I will be the judge of who is worthy. Do you understand? This is the core male-female divide. Men want to win the game and women want the power to decide who gets to win the game. And I hope that it is obvious to say that it is not in men's best interest to have women positioned as judges, as the ones who get to decide the winner.
I've never even thought about the whole women are actually the judges of winners. That does totally make sense, right? Because even if we're successful, we're good looking, we're 6 foot, women still kind of pick the winners in a sense. I'm not saying, winner in life, but winner in the game of relationships.
And women's interests are at odds with each other. Imagine a committee of men and women sitting down to decide the rules of the game. The men want to get started, so they want the rules to be clear, fair, simple, and as transparent as possible. Everybody understand the rules? Okay, great. Let's begin. May the best man win. Men love that. We just want to compete. We want to play the game under a system of rules that is fair. But imagine the women in that committee, they keep shouting down all the suggestions, all the ideas. They keep voting no. And it begins to seem as though they don't actually want to agree on any consistent set of rules. In fact, they don't even seem to want the game to start, and that's because they don't. Why would they? They're not going to win. There's no power in being a loser. where they feel powerful is being on the committee that gets to decide the rules. If those women had their way, then the rules would never get published. They would never tell the players of the game what the rules actually are.
I mean, it's kind of like that now. Women, they tell us a set of rules to attract women or what they're attracted to, but the actual attraction that triggers that do attract them are quite opposite of the rules they place down. Makes sense.
Would keep it vague on purpose, because if they do that, then men have to constantly return to the committee to check, to consult with the women. Am I doing a good job or not? Am I winning? That is a dream scenario for those women, because then they get to remain extremely powerful. They don't have to do anything. They don't even have to be consistent. In fact, their inconsistency is the source of their power. How good is that? How smart? But this is why men and women are at odds with each other, because men want closure and women want ongoing leverage. Men want objective, unchanging rules. They are impartial, they are fair. And if you're ever unsure whether you're succeeding or losing, it's easy to consult the rules. But women don't want that. They're completely sidelined in that scenario. They want to occupy the position of being the rules. They don't want objective, measurable standards to be the authority of what is good or not. They want to be that authority. Their dream is of a culture where whether or not something is good or not is measured by whether or not women approve of it. And they're allowed to change their minds about what's good, what's successful from day to day or from man to man. There
Sounds like the West right now.
is no need for consistency. The only consistency is them. And if you accuse women of hypocrisy, thinking that that's going to shame them, then you don't understand the female mind, because you're still thinking like a man. As guys, we pride ourselves on our consistency. But the double standards, that's not a bug of femininity, it's a feature. By constantly shifting positions and standards, that's how they keep their power intact. Don't be broke. Don't be toxic or short. Don't call me tits. Well, actually, it is okay now. In this instance and with this kind of a man, I will grant an exception. You think, what? Are you serious? Like, we just caught you contradicting yourself. So? What, you think she's going to feel guilty? Mate, pointing out double standards to a woman is not going to work, because you are appealing to a rule that she doesn't hold herself to.
No, he is so correct. I talk to a lot of women, and I always point out the double standards, and it just kind of goes over their head. They're like, what about it? Like, this is how I think, this is how I feel. I've never even thought about that. That's why they want the rules, and their preferences so ambiguous, because we still have to second guess ourselves, even if we achieve certain things. It's just like, did I do that right?
Your code of values and morality, but at its core, it is masculine. Women are running on different software. It's a different operating system. And I bet you're wondering, how is it that she's able to do this? How are women able to escape accountability? And how are they able to stay on top and in power? And men haven't realized that this is what's going on. The mechanics of how women do this is actually very clever. They do this via exceptions and intermittent reinforcement. In this way, it mimics gambling psychology that casinos use. And men have fallen for this in the same way that people get trapped by slot machines. Because if a slot machine never paid out any money, or it paid out the same amount every single time, nobody would really get addicted to them. It's the promise of the possibility of a payout that gets people hooked. In that way, the slot machine retains its power and occupies a lot of attention in the mind of gamblers. Women en masse have employed this same tactic, laying down laws and standards, but then proudly granting exceptions or only enforcing it intermittently. You see this with feminists who rage about toxic masculinity and female empowerment, but as many men have discovered, it's often the women who are the most feminist who enjoy really degrading sex. During the day, they're an activist on the street, but at night time, they want to be submissive to like a powerful, in control man. And they're turned on by the kind of language that they would claim that they hate. But instead of being outraged at this inconsistency, men have fallen for it because they dream of being the one who an exception is granted for.
True.
That's a huge ego boost. A lot of men are eager to line up to see if they'll be the lucky one who's let through the doors, when really there should be a collective male response of just disgust at this.
We kind of do have that now. Men have just kind of turned away at a lot of these women's issues, or women in general, because these double standards are just incomprehensible to men nowadays and don't want to deal with it.
Blatant hypocrisy. If men don't wake up to it, nothing's going to change, because women are not going to give up this position of power. Why would they? They are intoxicated by their power. They love being the ones to be in that position to grant exceptions. I know that this is difficult for you as a man to relate to, because if you wanted to feel powerful, you would work hard to be consistent, predictable, reliable. You would want to be unchanging on your values, because you know that's the kind of character that other men are going to respect. And it's also what women find attractive in men. But it's going to be difficult for you to conceive just how differently the female mind approaches this. For her, it is inconsistency that is her power. When you're in a relationship with an inconsistent woman and you don't know what the rules are, you don't know what her mood is, what she wants, what she likes, when she's going to enforce standards and when she's going to grant exceptions. But it is that inconsistency that is the source of her power. Do you compliment her appearance? Well, maybe that might make her feel pretty and validated, and she might be really pleased with you. Or potentially she could feel offended, like you're objectifying her. Do you pay for her meal? Maybe. Like she might say, that's so sweet and gentlemanly of you. Or she might be annoyed and say, you know, just because you pay for my meal doesn't mean I'm going to sleep with you. I'm an independent woman. I don't need a man to pay my bill for me. And which one of these two responses that you get might depend on how she's feeling that particular night. It can change. Or, more likely, it's going to depend upon the man. She'll have one set of rules for this type of guy and another set of rules for this kind of guy. She's not embarrassed by this. Stop thinking like a man. She's not trying to be consistent. When she proudly declares publicly that she's not the kind of girl that does casual hookups or one-night stands, the purpose of that declaration is not to broadcast that she has this fixed rule so that everybody knows what to expect from her. The purpose is to communicate a standard so that she can place herself in the powerful position of being the one who can break that standard when it suits her. Yes, Mr. Nice Guy, I told you that I don't do casual hookups, but I changed my mind with Mr. Smooth Talking bad boy at the club. I'm under no obligation to stick to my own rules. Why would I? Rules don't define my power. Exceptions do. And of course, men just hate this. We don't want to guess. We just want everything to be clear and fair. And a lot of men dream about the good old days when dating was more straightforward. Okay, so I just got to be a nice young boy. I got to go to church. I've got to get a job, treat my wife well, provide for my kids. And if I do all of that, then my life will work out. Check out.
I mean, this is the exact thing that we always hear about women. Oh, I have the perfect man. He's like the perfect husband. He takes care of the kids. He helps do all the chores, but I'm not happy. I want to leave him. Or, you know, the constant talking about the perfect man and still standards aren't met. Right? That's the whole limbo phase that he's talking about. And we're seeing it in such mass now because of online videos, TikTok and things. Women just kind of tell on themselves about these things.
This graph of how much later young people are getting married. It keeps on increasing. Men are having a lot of difficulty planning for their future because when it comes to dating and courtship and marriage, the rules seem to have been thrown out the window. Who knows how you're meant to behave? It used to be, I just do A, B, and C and everything will work out. But now so much is just dependent upon the vibe from the woman. Men hate that. It's left them feeling confused and frustrated and cheated. But while men are annoyed at this current situation, women kind of like it because the less clear the rules are, the more flexible everything is, the more power they have, the more control. Ask yourself this question: which gender is more likely to thrive when everything is orderly and structured? and which gender will perform better when everything is chaotic and unclear. Perhaps the reason why
I mean, this is why we say women are just pure chaos, because they thrive in chaos.
feminists are always criticizing the patriarchy, saying that it's a system set up for men to win and that it discriminates against women. Maybe the reason they hate that system so much is not because it inherently favors men, but simply because when the rules are clear, it's more of a meritocracy. And women are not keeping up with men because in a rules-based system, they're not as powerful. Seeing the data and seeing women underperform in all of these areas, the natural assumption has been that these women are getting discriminated against, but that's a very superficial understanding of what's actually occurring. The truth is that it is an objective fact that systems work best when the rules are clear. If you are a company and you're competing against another company, you have to make sure that everything that you're doing is maximally efficient. You're going into battle against all of your commercial competition. The expectations on employees need to be clear. But that kind of logical precision and that clarity, that is not where the strength of femininity lies. That's a masculine energy. Femininity has its own strength, the patience, the emotional nourishment, the beauty, the creativity, the social harmony. I have no interest in living in a world where everything is always masculine and logical. I love femininity, but let's be real, it is not a competitive energy. In a straight out competition, masculinity is always going to win. That's why when you get female CEOs, they're almost always that hard-nosed, really masculine kind of woman. They say it's really important that we get more women into the top jobs. And I think, okay, sure, but have you noticed that the kind of women that rise to those positions, they're basically men? They think and operate like men, and that's how they were able to stand out from their other female peers. There's not going to be some mushy new age like mummy blogger kind of energy woman who's leading up like Amazon. It's not going to work. Femininity has its place, but ultimately in a competitive field, it is clear expectations that make people feel safer. People want to know what the rules are, the boundaries, the values that we're operating under. People want to have that clear. I've covered this before, but this is the reason why children in single father households outperform children in single mother households. And I'll grant you, it's probably the case that for the first 6 years of a child's life, the feminine energy is much more important. But as a child gets older and they grow in their independence, that unconditional love and support that you get from a mother is less important than the masculine discipline, standards, and boundaries that you get from a father. Because the children who are doing the best as teenagers, when they're navigating that really awkward period, they're almost always the ones who have really great fathers. And by great fathers, I don't mean that the fathers place themselves as an authority so that their children are constantly having to check in with their fathers to see if he approves. No, it's not about him. He doesn't want to set himself up as the authority, but what he's good at doing is articulating the value system, the rules, the structure which the children should use to guide their lives. He is not the authority. His value system is, and if he's doing his job correctly, those children will internalize that value system, and so it becomes theirs. They take ownership of it, and they consult themselves when deciding what is the right course of action. If he's done a really good job, then his teenage children will start to notice when their dad is not living up to his own values, and they'll point out his hypocrisy. It's probably really annoying as the parent in that situation when it happens, but it's actually proof that you've done your job correct. If you spend the first 12 years of your life as their father preaching consistency and fairness, and then you as their dad start to do something illogical and they call you on it, that's a good thing. You should be proud of them. But we know the research of what happens when fathers are absent and it's left to mothers to raise their teenage children. Less structure, less boundaries, less explicit communication of the values, and far worse outcomes for the children. And so the first step for you as a man is to understand the game that is being played here by women, because it's different than the game that you're playing. She's not trying to be consistent. She's interested in retaining her power. She wants to place herself as the judge of what's good and bad. Obviously, not all women. High quality women have risen above this. Yes, they might still be feminine and emotional, but they fundamentally agree and have internalized values of fairness and consistency. I'm generalizing here so that you can notice the overall trend, because that's your first step, is to see this pattern and to understand it. And your second step is to stop falling for it. If you want to know what is good or what...
This is where we, come up with the stop simping thing, right? Because if you're playing these women's games and putting them on pedestals and giving them this power to judge whenever because you're not good enough, then you're kind of losing the game before you even play the game, in a sense.
What is bad, what is success, and what is being a loser. Stop consulting women. You can't trust them to be the judges because they have their own selfish motives for whatever verdict they're handing out. When you allow a woman to pass judgment on you like this, you can't trust that you're getting some unbiased verdict. In all likelihood, she's making herself feel powerful at your expense. And I hope it's obvious from the fatherhood discussion that the solution is not to make men judges either. It's not even to make yourself the judge. Men can be emotional too. We can flip-flop. We can be inconsistent day to day. What I'm talking about is an awareness of a set of values and principles, objective rules and standards that you can measure yourself against. To still be measuring yourself against the opinion of a person is kind of like a child's logic, like a really young child who's like, okay, what's good and what's bad is just whatever mum and dad say. We have to evolve beyond that. Like as a teenager, at that level of development, most people understand it's like, okay, people are inconsistent and untrustworthy. But this idea, this set of principles, these values that are beyond human frailty, that should be my North Star. And the best news is that those values, that's actually the most effective way to undermine women's power, which they're exercising in a toxic way. If you're in a relationship with a woman who does this, or you have a female family member or co-worker, doesn't matter, but she set herself up to be the authority, you don't challenge the source of her power by saying, no, instead of you being the authority, I'll be the authority. No, you say, hey, let's both be held to these objective standards. That's what's fair. They will apply to both of us. In an indirect way, this is going to remove that element of female power and it's going to balance everything out. It's actually the path forward with the least antagonism and tribalism. And I'm going to spend the rest of the video explaining how this works.
It is interesting that I talk to a lot of women and I always point out the hypocrisy, and yes, they never seem to care. And I've always wondered, why do they ever really care about how wrong they are or how much of a hypocrite they are? But this totally kind of puts it in perspective, right? Because they can set a rule and break it whenever they want. Now we are like, wait, but you said this. Now you kind of have to refer back to them why that rule came in the be, or why you don't qualify for that rule. And it really does give them power over us. This is again why, we tell men to not simp and tell men to kind of go your own way, find your own purpose, find your own morals and guidance, and use those morals and guidance to live your life, not what other people say and do. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. I really appreciate that. And I'll catch you guys next time. Ciao.